Hello, everyone. Happy New Year and welcome to our special guest lecture series. This is the first guest lecture that we have in the new year 2024, and we are so happy to meet you again. This is guest lecture number 51, and Dhamma USA is organizing this special venture to benefit many enthusiastic learners of Buddhism relating to contemporary issues. So every Thursday at 6 p.m., some guest speaker from around the world will share a special guest lecture on various topics related to Buddhism and life in general. Every Thursday, so please join us. So the event snapshot today is lecture number 51, and today we have a familiar face, in fact, Reverend Sensei Seiso, and the topic is thinking's bad rap, and the topic itself is very interesting, actually. So I hope we can discuss more and we can learn more from Reverend Seiso about the thinking's bad rap and how important and how we can actually connect that topic to our own known territory of Buddhism in the Theravada perspective. Reverend Seiso Paul C. Cooper is a formally transmitted teacher in the Soto Zen lineage of Dainin Katagari Roishi, and he holds significant affiliations, including being a full member of the Soto Zen Buddhist Association and the American Zen Teachers Association. As a co-founder and a former guiding teacher at Two Rivers Zen Community in Narrowsburg, New York, and Lincoln Zen in Lincoln, Nebraska, Reverend Cooper has been an influential figure in the realm of Zen practice. He is also the founder of Realization and Practice Studies group in Montpelier, Vermont. So with that, I would like to respectfully invite Reverend Sensei Seiso to the studio. Happy New Year, Sensei, Reverend, to our, first of all, the New Year, and second, you are the first, actually, in the Thursday guest lecture series during this year that we have invited to talk, and so happy to see you. Happy New Year.
And happy to be here.
Yes, so Sensei, the topic here is also actually an interesting topic. Before letting you speak, I would really like to learn a little bit more about thinking's bad rap. What do you mean by this topic?
Well, as I'll explain in the talk this evening, let me put it this way. There's a misunderstanding that when you meditate, you're supposed to stop your thinking, which doesn't make any sense because the mind is supposed to think. That's what it does. The ears hear, the nose smells, the eyes see, the body feels, the mind thinks.
Right.
So
Right.
there's an idea that has been labeled as quietism, and it's a practice that attempts to defeat thinking. But even when you're not thinking, you really think you're still thinking unconsciously, but you might not be aware of it. So we have to understand uh, how this can affect our practice and our study of the Buddha way in a way that, Zen Buddhism is in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition. So the goal of practice is to free all beings from their suffering lives, uh, and that includes us, each of us, each and every one of us. We have an obligation to ourselves to practice correctly so that we can see reality for what it is, and we can benefit others who are suffering. So basically, that's what I'll be talking about.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. So it's actually also connected to Theravada Buddhism. Sometimes maybe the technical jargon that seem to be conflicting, but can agree in many ways. Yeah, and really appreciate your presence here with Dhamma USA community, and we look forward to hearing from you today on this topic. And yeah, the stage is yours.
Thank you. And again, thank you for having me here. And you raise a really important point. In general, uh, Buddhism has a tendency to take on the color and the culture of the different countries where it migrated to. So, in a superficial way, our ideas and practices look very different. But underneath, the underlying sense of Buddha nature or basic goodness or whatever you want to call it is common to us all, and suffering is common to us all. So, to me, all Buddhist traditions are geared towards the Buddha's historical Buddha's mandate to free all beings from suffering and live hopefully a productive and helpful life. I'd like to begin um, with a mando. A mando is a traditional Zen Buddhist question and answer dialogue, usually between a Zen master and his disciple. And this particular mando cogently and tersely points to the role and importance of thinking in Buddhist practice from the Zen Buddhist perspective. So let me read the mando to you. Once, when the great master, Huang Gao of Weishan, was sitting in meditation, a monk asked him, "What are you thinking of, sitting there so fixedly?" The master answered, "I'm thinking of not thinking." The monk asked, "How do you think of not thinking?" And the master answered, "Non thinking." Now, in contrast to the intensity of feelings and thoughts that I'll describe in a moment from my own meditation practice, it seems that in popular culture, there's a definite bias and an emphasis on the calm surface of meditation, and often a wholesale disregard for the truth of our own thinking and our perceptual processes and their products. However, as you might have noticed, during practice, tension can build up, as it often does. The Zen meditator is advised to simply continue sitting, guided by Mushotoku, which is a Japanese expression that means no gaining mind, no profit mind, no goal in mind. We simply permit whatever emerges into awareness without judgment, without attachment, without aversion, without grasping, without pushing away. Now, what happens if we stay on that mandate over time? The intense states will soften and have less impact. In this way, difficult states of mind become workable, and we form a different relationship to internal processes like thinking and feeling, and to others. The response to allowing and being with all these emerging, crystallizing, and dissolving mind moments, one tolerates the evolution of thinking processes as they transform into authentic thinking, which, as the Buddhist philosopher He Jin Kim notes, thinking that becomes revaluated, or he uses the term revalorized, in a manner that creates right thinking and right action. It is important that no matter how frustrated or discouraged we become in our practice, we just need to have faith in the process and to just keep sitting no matter what. That's my mantra. Just keep sitting no matter what. Well, with these points in mind as an introduction to this discussion, and speaking from my own direct experience during a session, which is an extended retreat and intense practice period, I'm going to offer this narrative in terms of what we can describe as oscillations ranging from passion to unbidden rage, and how I just kept sitting as still as possible until eventually the psychic storm subsided and a state of deep calm developed. Now, the point here is the calm didn't actually develop. It's already there. We all have this within us, but we need to bring it out into the open through the practice. I feel the bubbling over, watch the volcanic eruption, watch selves, others form, melt, crystallize, shatter in permutations of liquid psychic lava, emotional upsurge, and outflow. Just sitting in meditation increases the capacity for handling increasing intensities. Continued sitting in the wider oscillations of whatever rises and falls as aspects of this one larger process brings into the present situation for me an awareness of inner obstructions and dissolves anger, which, if suffered through by just sitting and noticing what is being experienced, transforms into passion, evolving into awareness in the form of many different thoughts and feelings with variations in speed and intensity. Passion, longing for union with the divine, with a lover, the universe, the teachings, truth, life, death, the moment, the infinite moment, intimate contact with the depths of one's own being, passion of forms and images, swirling, spewing multicolored mind flowers that blossom and melt away to the limits of what I can take, and then back to breathing and sitting, and the ringing bell, and up again for slow walking. Then we sit again, and I sit with rage and find myself opening into passion, or perhaps passion opening into what I imagine is the me. Rage, passion's seal and signpost, opening and or closing, lock and key, Zen's gateless gate, mu, barrier and entrance, all in one. Can one grow through rage, past rage's destructiveness until it burns itself into passion? From this Zafu, meditation cushion, if I embrace the horror and disturbance of felt rage, I can embrace the enlivening fires of passion. I swallow fire and dream rainbows. Rage, passion's burning bush. The deadliness of rage can feed the aliveness of passion. Raging passions, passionate rages. The serpent swallows its own tail and dissolves into infinity. Rage feels tense, tight, constricted in my body, nerves, muscles, bones, joints. The ache intensifies. Each heartbeat ripples through the body into the limbs, the joints, the ends of my fingers and toes. Yet, when the tail of rage's tiger is fully grasped, embraced, it becomes passion. Passion, a multifaceted gem that crystallizes into form and action, mobilized by compassion, permutations of lived compassion and passion for peace, creature comforts, foods, eros, connectedness, aliveness, all kinds of pleasures, music, passion for writing, painting, creating and destroying, orgasmic passions, all of it. Passion that oscillates between work and play, love and hate, mutually consumed and consuming. Play transforming to work, work becoming play. Love and hate passions that split, become, asunder, dissolve, and merge. I look up and watch the rising sun reflecting on the lake outside the temple window. Suddenly, all is calm, and I write a poem. From this zafu, just past the open window, between bare winter branches, the rising sun shimmers on the wind-rippled lake. So that doesn't sound like a meditation, that particular meditation was free of thoughts or completely calm, does it? But it's something that needed to be worked through. So as I talk, please keep in mind that the term thoughts also serves as a shorthand for all the mental events that can happen, including thoughts, emotions, memories, wishes, fantasies, desires, and the processes that produce them. At the very least, thoughts, depending on how one relates to them, can easily become a problem or they can evolve into a solution. Now, the relationship between Zazen or Zen meditation and thinking has been a problem in Zen Buddhism since its inception within the Chan tradition in China centuries ago. This problem has continued right through to the present day. This difficulty has typically been expressed in terms of the conflict between quietist and insight-oriented practices. On one hand, a misunderstanding of Buddhist meditation creates the impossible expectation that thoughts must be eliminated at all costs. However, the mind is supposed to think. That's what it does. Just like the ears hear and the nose smells and the eyes see, the body feels, the mind thinks. This misguided, and in my opinion, misperception of Buddhist meditation often creates negative self-judgments. When the misinformed practitioner fails at eliminating thoughts. A preoccupation with this project of thought elimination can really interfere with realizing basic truths about oneself, one's relationship to others, and in this manner, while well-intentioned, such practices can become a misguided form of resistance that can be very active at times. The Sanskrit term for Buddhist ignorance, avidya, implies an unconscious but very active form of not knowing. It's not passive. Now let me shift a bit. Eihei Dogen was the 13th century Japanese monk who founded the Soto Zen school of Buddhism, of which I'm a part of. He promoted a radical, non-dualistic, and all-inclusive perspective. From this view, we notice that thoughts arise and must somehow be tolerated. As you know from your practice, some thoughts can be punishing. Some thoughts can humiliate or persecute and disturb your sense of well-being. Some thoughts can depress, discourage, and interfere with the ability to function and the desire to practice. Other thoughts can take the form of fantasies and seduce the meditator into states of imagined or felt ecstasy, dreams, or seemingly otherworldly visions of the sublime, like I described from my own experience. Still, other thoughts can engender a state of what Togen called repose and ease. As he suggests in Fukan Zazen, his first writing on the subject, which translates to universal promotion of the principles of Zen meditation. The practitioner alternates through a continuum of infinite states between terror and delight, among others. Now, Dogen poignantly describes these alternating thought processes associated with a non-exclusive ongoing awareness that operates free from attachment and aversion in an article he wrote called The Samadhi that is the King of Samadhis. I'm going to quote a passage from this article to emphasize this point. He writes, "Just in the moment of sitting, investigate whether the universe is vertical and whether it is horizontal. Just in the moment of sitting, what is the sitting itself? Is it a somersault? Is it a state of vigorous activity? Is it thinking? Is it beyond thinking? Is it doing something? Is it not doing anything? Is it sitting inside of sitting? Is it sitting inside of the body-mind? Is it sitting that is free of the inside of sitting, the inside of body-mind, and so on? There should be investigation of thousands and tens of thousands of points like these. So, sit in the meditation posture with the body. Sit in the meditation posture with the mind. Sit in the meditation posture that is free of body and mind." I hope you get the idea here. So no matter where thoughts go, no matter what emerges, as sitting in Zazen continues, the body is still and contains whatever else you may be thinking. In this way, sitting evokes a pure receptiveness and readiness and a lived immediacy to the presently fully experienced moment, no matter what seems to be happening. Now, the particular practice to support this view is called shikantaza, which means just sitting or only sitting. And this is the practice of Zazen, Zen meditation, advocated by Dogen. As I noted, it's foundational and functions as an expression of our original realization. For instance, in the opening lines of Bendoa, I talk about pursuing the truth, and I'm going to quote him again. For the enjoyment of this samadhi, the practice of Zazen in the erect sitting posture has been established as the authentic gate. This Dharma is abundantly present in each human being. But if we do not practice it, it does not manifest itself. And if we do not experience it, it cannot be realized. In this way, Dogen describes the relationship between practice and realization as shusho ichinyo, another Japanese term, which means the oneness of practice and realization. The oneness of practice and realization. That means that realization is practice and practice is already realization. Despite his insistence on this point, thinking is often considered to be unreal and is typically minimized and therefore considered inconsequential or even viewed as an obstruction to spiritual unfolding. Here's an example. Commenting on the dialogue between Yue-shen and the monk that I opened tonight's talk with, a very well-renowned Zen teacher, Daido John Laurie, asserts, abide in neither thinking nor not thinking. Thinking is linear and sequential, a separation from reality that is the subject of thought and thus is an abstraction rather than the reality itself. Now, this advice to abide in neither thinking nor not thinking is well taken and points directly to the heart of shikantaza meditation practice, just as Togen describes it from his radical non-dualistic perspective. However, the instruction is qualified with a critique and devaluation of thinking, and although not explicitly stated or even intended, it could generate the inference that thinking should somehow be eliminated because it is, quote, unreal. It is important to keep in mind that from Dogen's radical non-dualism, which is reflected and expressed in this meditation practice of shikantaza, that abstraction is also an aspect of the currently manifesting reality. As unreal as thoughts can be, they can certainly exert powerful reality consequences, especially when mistaken for reality without question. Regardless of alterations in our perceptual awareness, such as between the dualistic orientation of relative being and the unitive experience of absolute being, our lives are lived as one reality. This is described by Dogen in an article called Busho, which means Buddha nature. or total existence is the Buddha nature. Experientially, this is what Dogen describes as suchness. It is when an individual takes either the relative or the absolute exclusively as the whole reality that problems start to happen. Especially when those thoughts are projected onto the world and its objects of perception, such as when a false inference becomes enacted, for example, considering the relationship between form and emptiness. Traditionally, Mahayana Buddhist teachings emphasize the negation of form as the key to realization. However, in a radical shift, Dogen argues that realizing the true reality of being requires the simultaneous awareness of both form and emptiness. Therefore, form is not negated, but it needs to be understood for what it is, that it's not permanent. Form and emptiness both affirm and negate each other as two aspects of one reality. This common, although erroneous view of Zen Buddhist meditation is that meditation and thinking don't go together. They're antithetical. And that thinking must be eliminated for the practitioner to be successful. For example, the Buddhist philosopher Akihito Izutsu views thinking as a major obstacle to the realizational attainment. And he argues for, quote, a mistrust in thinking and an elimination of discursive thinking, end quote. This is a typical of this common view, although it's misguided. His comment serves as a typical example of the critique of thinking, and it's an example of a larger response to thinking in the history of Zen Buddhism. As the Buddhist philosopher Masao Abe observes, and I quote him, in Zen, the positive and creative aspects of human thinking have been neglected, and only its dualistic and discriminative aspects have been clearly realized as something to be overcome. This negative attitude towards thinking doesn't make any sense. It flies in the face of the notion of Shoshiryo, which means right thinking, which, as I mentioned, is part of the Buddhist Eightfold Path and is foundational in clarifying through experience based on practice the fundamental tenets of all Buddhist systems. From the perspective described by what, we might characterize them as anti-thinkers. They see thinking as occupying the lowest rung on a ladder in a hierarchical progression of mind states. These factors have led to thinking almost being incapacitated in the tradition. As a result, they still, He-Jin Kim notes, are odd bedfellows today more than ever. So how did this happen and where did this view come from? Well, in Chinese Chan Buddhism, this view can be traced back to an incorrect understanding of the 5th century first ancestor of Zen Buddhism in China, Bodhidharma, who was an Indian monk who traveled to China. And he had a practice of wall gazing. in terms of the difference between sitting and what came to be described as Shuzen or learning meditation. The Zen teacher Isho Fujita, who documented this, wrote, "Except for his own disciples, small in number, very few could understand the true meaning of what he was doing by facing the wall." Now, Shuzen can be described as a form of meditation to attain a special state of mind, referred to in Sanskrit as dhyana. In other words, Shuzen, from this point of view, describes an instrumental or facilitative goal-oriented practice that is limited in scope by its focus on a specific goal. And drawing from its Indian roots, this goal can include the cessation of thought, the attainment of magical powers, the induction of trance states, or ultimately merger with the divine. The practice thus becomes an instrument or a tool that is secondary to the projected goal, whatever that goal may be. Now, the Chinese scholar monk and historian Zhao Sushuan, who lived in the 6th and 7th centuries, erroneously described Bodhidharma as a practitioner of dhyana, and this fueled the confusion between his practice of Zazen and Shuzen. Now, for a long time, no one could understand the reason for that sitting, so they saw Bodhidharma as training in Zen meditation. But the practice of dhyana is only one among many forms of practice. How could it be all that there was, especially for Bodhidharma? Yet, because of this practice, the people of that time who made chronicles erroneously listed him among the people who were practicing dhyana, and they grouped him alongside these people, which in Chinese they refer to like withered trees and dead ash. Nevertheless, he didn't stop at the practice of dhyana. At the same time, of course, he did not go against it either. He just kept practicing. Now, Dogen picks up on this thread and makes the distinction between Zazen and Shuzen very clear in Fukan Zazenji, the article I mentioned a little while ago, Zen Principles of Meditation. He makes a reference to Shuzen by cogently and clearly asserting, the Zazen I speak of is not learning meditation. It is simply the Dharma gate of repose and bliss. For many centuries, Zen Buddhist teachers have strived to expose and correct this mistake, that Zazen or Zen meditation was an instrumental or quietist practice designed to stop the mind from thinking. For example, here's a contemporary Zen example in the writings of Sakai Harada Roshi. And he writes, I think there are many of you who think I must not think, so you suppress thought. This is the worst thing to do. You are suppressing the natural flow of the Dharma itself. Don't think of trying to suppress thought by thinking, don't think, don't think. Your essential nature is lost. Without any freedom or comfort, you only end up sitting and thinking of trying to get rid of suffering. This is the sickness of not knowing that the thought of getting rid of suffering is also suffering. So, in many places, whether explicitly or implicitly asserted, a devaluation of thinking still unfortunately exists. Part of the problem stems from the fact that how we understand, or rather how we translate practice, can also be determined by unconscious factors that support rationalizations that then in turn drive inappropriate ideas about practice. As a result, such erroneous views can cause serious relational problems, such as misusing the teachings to rationalize egocentric agendas or to enact cultish, abusive, or exploitive behaviors. Practitioners can fall into the trap of turning these misguided ideas about practice against the self and also against others. Now, such ideas often operate subliminally in the background of consciousness and guide the practitioner's experience of practice and resulting behaviors, often in extremely subtle ways. That's why it's so important to practice with a qualified teacher. Internally, misguided practice, driven by the false idea that we must eliminate thinking, can become coupled with wrong-minded evaluations, frequently, as I mentioned before, in the form of harsh, negative self-judgment for the failure to stop thinking during meditation. This misguided orientation dynamically splits the mind. Part of the mind produces thoughts, as it should and will, while another split-off part of the mind stands back in judgment, based on a failure of any attempts to completely eliminate thinking. This thought good, that thought bad, thinking bad, no thoughts good. All kinds of internal monologues. This orientation, no matter how subtle, imposes unnecessary pressure on the practitioner and creates a practical problem. Because, to reiterate, the mind is supposed to think. That's what it does. Now, psychoanalysis, for example, describes the unconscious operations of internalized persecutory early object images. When not identified and questioned, tremendous authority becomes attached to judgmental thoughts. The thoughts become solidified and turned into a judge. And we can forget that the judge is also just thoughts, whether conscious or unconscious. The false quietist view that characterizes thinking as an obstacle to realization, it is believed erroneously, must be overcome. Not by removing this false view, but by seeing through it. The so-called judge is just a habituated thought pattern, or in Sanskrit, samskara, which means karmic formation. This false view that negates and attempts to annihilate thinking parallels a religious practice ideal of the mortification and negation of the flesh that devalues physical being as impure. Due to this posited contamination, physical being is erroneously implicated as functioning to obstruct higher spiritual realization or transcendence. The Buddha, who was deeply engaged in such practices for many years, eventually saw through the futility of this misguided dualistic conception, and he gave up such practices, which ultimately led to his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. Further, this misguided approach can create a vicious cycle that causes and perpetuates the suffering, in part because the attention is on the actual thoughts themselves, rather than on the activity that occurs with one's relationship to the thoughts, such as the tendency to eliminate them. What if you just sat back and noticed them as they come and go? Imagine that. Now, this false view of Buddhist practice is embedded in the culture and can be deeply ingrained in the practitioner's unconscious, even though consciously and cognitively one knows better. Intellectually, the view that thoughts should be eliminated can still operate to one degree or another unconsciously and influence how we respond to practice and how such misguided practice can function as an obstacle to the lived experience of what Togen described in Fukan Zazen as not meditation, but as self-fulfilling ease and joy. Self-fulfilling ease and joy. This approach to practice, that is, the attempt to eliminate thoughts or to focus exclusively on a specific object such as the breath, a body part, or a mantra, can become a distraction from the actual practice of naturally just sitting and only sitting. Now, I understand that in many traditions of these practices are used, but they're used with a specific goal in mind to realize the true nature of reality, that impermanence, selflessness, and such. The correct intention centers on simply sitting and allowing what will emerge naturally, unforced and unfettered, without attachment, aversion, or judgment. As I mentioned before, just as the eyes see, the ears hear, the nose smells, the tongue tastes, mind thinks. So there's no need to defeat thinking. In fact, in Zen Buddhism is taught that a still mind is a dead mind. The notion of calm or stillness within the rising and falling of all mental processes, not an elimination of mental processes, is the key. It is one's actions and relationships that are important here. In other words, it is our attitude and relationship to thinking that is the issue. When we realize this and can take the backward step, our naturalness, if you will, evolves, and a deeper sense of ease and joy, which has always been present, becomes more obvious. So in conclusion, contrary to the bad rap that thinking continues to receive, thoughts and thinking processes certainly have positive uses. Making the distinctions and discriminations that derive through linear thinking, for example, contribute to healthy boundaries and to solving the many challenges and problems that we all face daily. Getting lost in the absolute can result in unhealthy and dangerous choices, including inappropriate boundary violations that we unfortunately hear too much about these days. We're all one, but we're also unique and separate. Many instances that occur in everyday life requires that separations remain intact, that differences are respected and honored, that healthy distances remain in place, while at the same time realizing our fundamental interconnectedness with all beings. For example, I live in Vermont now, but I spent most of my life in Midtown New York City. And I would often tell my New York City students that it is essential to distinguish between green and red lights when we engage in the very busy crossing at 34th Street and Lexington Avenue, that despite our absolute oneness, we don't want to merge with a speeding taxi when crossing the street. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sensei, Reverend Seiso, for this wonderful, wonderful teaching on the subject, thinking's bad rap. Yes, I do remember like how New York is not only full of traffic lights, but also full of so many bridges. Right. Yeah. So like coming back to the topic, like thinking's bad rap, it is also related to, like in Theravada terms, we call how to stop thinking, which is a really a challenging thing. But when it comes to certain samadhis and we call attainments and like jhanas and samapatis, uh, people probably can stop thinking. In Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "Mano pubbangama dhamma." The mind is the um, forerunner of all evil states and also happy states, right? So, and also in somewhere else, the Buddha said, "Chittena niyati loko." The world is led by the mind. So, uh, yes, when and in uh, another statement, the Buddha said, "Pabhassara midang bhikkhave chittang panchakopana agantukehi upakkilesehi upakkilitang." The mind, in its origin, is pristinely pure, and it is actually contaminated by the incoming defilements. And so, how do we keep that original purity of the mind? Yeah, by not thinking. So, the more we think, the more it contaminated, right? So, in especially Sensei, in today's fast moving world, people are engaged in so many things, and so how do we apply this theory into practice? Would you open up a little bit to give us some idea to how to practically apply this
Well,
one?
that's a very good point. I'm going to share an image.
Okay.
In Zen Buddhism, in China, many of the abbots of the temples were named after the mountains where the temples were. So the image of the mountain reflects the solidness and the stillness of the person's meditation practice. So if we take for a minute that the body becomes a container for everything, no matter where your thoughts go, up, down, sideways, backwards, forwards, good, bad, your body's still just sitting there. That's the reality. We have to remember that. So I often tell people that have trouble with that, just say to yourself, basic fact of sitting. Basic fact of sitting. And check your posture and go back to your breath and check your posture and start over again. Now, I've used that technique myself so many times that as soon as I even think it, my body starts to straighten out because it was probably not sitting as straight as I thought I was. And it becomes automatic. The body's a mountain. Now, we could say that the mind is a cave at the top of the mountain. But the mind is not the wind that's blowing through the cave. So the thoughts are like the wind. They're just blowing in the cave and blowing out again. And we're just sitting. So we don't have to worry about anything. And if we're worrying, that's part of sitting too. That's suchness. And the problem is, I think people get so caught up in the thoughts themselves that they're not really aware of the mind. If maybe I could say a few more words about that. That we could say the mind is the cave or like a mirror, right? And the thoughts of the wind or all of the things that reflect in the mirror. But whatever reflects in the mirror is only a reflection, and then as soon as you step away from the mirror, it's gone. It's not the mirror. So these ideas, I think, could help us when we practice. Because the other thing that I notice that happens with people that continue to practice in this way is suppose they had a bad experience in their life, and whenever that experience comes up in the memory, they get really upset, which is understandable. But if we just keep sitting little by little, whenever that experience comes up, our reaction to it softens little by little, like water flowing on a stone. After a while, the stone got smoothed and polished and shiny, like a river stone. Now, the thing is, if you think about it, to use that example, the stone didn't go in the river to get polished. And the river didn't flow over the stone with the intention of polishing it. But the stone got polished anyway by just sitting in the river of our thoughts, of our feelings, our desires, our concerns, our memories, our joys. They just keep flowing like the wind in the cave. And I just keep sitting no matter what. And of course, it's easier said than done because as you know, the ego will play tricks on us and pull us away from practice. Oh, I'm not going to do that. That's stupid. It just makes my knees hurt. I get a pain in my lower back. What a waste of time that is. The ego comes up with so many tricks. It's a trickster. Doesn't want to be confronted. So again, I go back to the body, the basic fact of sitting. Now, that article that I mentioned before, Fukan Zazenji, the basic principles of Zen Buddhist meditation, that Dogen wrote, he spends 2/3 of the article just talking about the physical aspects of sitting. And I think in American culture, sitting practice got mentalized, and we lose track of the body. And when I was in Japan and learned this practice, they spent most of the time talking to us about the posture and the breathing and very little following Dogen, because in this whole article, he only has one sentence to say about the mind. And that's from that Mondo, that question and answer dialogue that I read at the beginning. And he doesn't even tell the whole dialogue. He just says, the essential art of sitting is to think of not thinking. How do you think of not thinking? By leaving the thoughts alone. That's an alternative translation. That's all he says about the mind in the whole article. So if we remember to begin with a good posture and keep the body involved in the practice. One technique is to do, in the Chinese Chan Buddhists do this often, to begin with a kind of a self-guided relaxation, starting with the crown of the head and working down to the feet and with the breathing. And then begin to just feel the whole body. And if your attention goes to one part of the body, just to notice it, but then bring the attention back to the whole body again without concentrating on it, just noticing. And then after a while, the awareness will expand out into the practice space. If you're in the temple, to the outside environment, to the whole universe.
All right. So the I think before going forward, would you please repeat the author of that article again? Basic Principles of Zen Buddhist Meditation by?
Yes, it's Dogen, Dogen.
Togen. Togen.
G, like go.
Okay. Togen.
Yeah, and the title of the article, because it's translated in different ways, is Fukan Zazenji.
Okay.
Fukanzazengi.
Fuken.
Fuken. No,
Okay.
Fukan. Fukan.
Okay.
Za. Za.
Okay.
Zengi. If you like, I could email you a copy of it.
Yeah, right. So I just want to actually post it here for our audience to know, so they can maybe also take a look.
Yeah, I think it's a help. It's the Dogen was dissatisfied with Buddhism in Japan,
Is this
so
correct?
he went to China for 4 years, and when he came back from China, he was enlightened, and this was the first article that he wrote.
Is this correct? The name? Can you see the on
Yes,
the
it's
screen?
Dogen. Dog, like dog.
Okay.
En.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So yeah, in Theravada Buddhism, we also have Kayagata Sati, like mindfulness immersed in the body. We also stay focused when we meditate, and the body scanning is really helpful to stay calm and stay kind of having unification of mind and stay focused. And then again, the mind is so abstract, it's difficult to contain. It is compared to a wild buffalo.
I'm
So
sorry, what's that last statement that you made?
the mind is compared to a wild buffalo. So
Okay.
right, so difficult to contain, and it's really really wild, and so mind starts to wander. Yeah, I think as you mentioned, stay focused on your body, and the posture can really be helpful. And although mind is abstract, if we pay attention to that objective of meditation, in this case, I think it looks like Kayagata Sati in your version. Correct me if I'm wrong. So you scan your body and you concentrate and bodily posture. It's really important, and then you can
Yeah,
also stay focused,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And then the focus is just on the present moment.
Right. For
So
present moment.
whatever comes, and then whatever goes. Because I would argue that most people, including myself, don't know what we were thinking 3 or 4 thoughts back.
Mm, mm. Yeah, some people even have the problem of like not really recognizing what they are doing. Yeah, like they either go to the past, they think of the past, or they maybe worry about the past, or daydream of the future. It's so hard for a lot of people, a lot of practitioners to stay focused at the present moment. Um,
So that's the goal of the practice.
mm. Yeah,
Uh,
that's right. That's definitely like you can be rock solid in your posture, and your mind can be so wandering everywhere.
yeah,
So it's so important, I think, to stay focused at the present moment, as you
and
mentioned.
it's important that uh, we notice that the mind was wandering, because then that'll bring us right back.
Hmm. Hmm. So, do you do something physically like striking or something, or you just talking to yourself?
I just start over again.
Start over. Okay.
Yeah, since there's no goal to the practice really, it's just you're expressing your being and your innate realization already. You're not really starting over again because you're not going anywhere.
Hmm.
So we were having a retreat, and the person that was keeping time for the meditation had a little timer with a light flashing on it. And after the round of meditation, someone said, "Could you turn the light flasher off, the flasher off?"
Hmm.
And I said, "What was your concern?" And he said, "It's distracting me." And I said, "Well, what's it distracting you from?" Because if we're open to everything, there's nothing to be distracted from.
Right. Right. So I remember, like I also when we I practice personally, I also try to focus at the present moment, and when the mind goes to some other thoughts, so you come back to your meditation, either to your breathing,
Yeah.
or to your bodily posture, scanning, or loving kindness, which is even a little bit more. Um, I think when we practice loving kindness, it is the thought, but we can think of many things. Like you think of yourself, you can think of your loved ones, and neutral ones, and also the unfriendly ones, and all sentient beings. You keep thinking, right? So there is a
Yeah.
scope for you to stay focused there, but in a different perspective. But when it comes to actually, Reverend Sensei, when it comes to anapanasati or breath meditation, it is really hard for the mind to stay focused because the breath is so subtle, and so sometimes you don't feel like you are breathing, and some people like bewildered, what happens to my breath? And
Uh,
then yeah, these things happen when the body and the mind become so calm, and then the breath becomes so subtle, right? And
yeah. Yeah.
I think in
I,
this
that could scare some people.
yes, that scares people because they think like I'm not breathing. Right. That's actually that could happen to practitioners like the beginners. So, but they still need to continue because of the attachment, right? You think you are there. You think this is my body. That self identity. So you are scared,
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And yeah, so how long do you practice, like maybe do you have any particular timing
Well,
for
yes,
different
I do. What I like to practice in the morning for 40 minutes,
okay,
and sometimes then 10 minutes of walking, and then a second round of 40 minutes, but not
okay,
every morning. And since I have the Two Rivers group, um, we have a meditation every morning,
mm,
and different people lead the meditation, and many people are new to it, so they usually practice for 30 minutes.
wonderful, very wonderful. And yeah, I think the idea of using walking meditation in between can be like a bridge between two different sitting sessions. Uh, it,
Yeah.
it,
Do
it,
you use that practice of walking also?
yeah, we do that. We do the same actually. I'm trying to see what is different within us. Now, whatever you said, like we also do almost the same thing. And like when we sit, and then after a while we go for a walk, and then with the same mindfulness and attention, and then we come back and sit and continue to meditation. So it is like the bridges in New York connecting the two rivers or two banks of the same river, or
I see.
two
Yeah.
sides. Like, so when we walk, it helps us still to continue, right? The bodily, but some people can really bear the pain, bodily pain, and so then you can go for a walk, and then you can still remain with the same mindfulness and attention and alertness, and come back to sit and meditate. That's really
Yeah.
helpful.
The Chan people, the contemporary Chan people, the followers of Sheng Yan, the Chinese folks, they do self massage after each round of meditation.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, it's true. It's very true. Like it's a massage to you because you kind of bodily numb, and then you go for
Yeah.
a walk, and it gives
Yeah.
you.
That's that.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
When I used to live in New York State, I lived near their temple, so I
Mm,
would practice with them every once in a while, and that's what they would do
all right.
after every round of meditation.
So when you keep practicing this meditation, do you also teach about attaining or accomplishment, some like jhana or attainment, and then we also talk about those absorptions and attainments in Theravada Buddhism. How,
No, I don't. I've read a little bit about those practices, but no, I just do the shikantaza, the basic sitting and the walking. And when I teach about Togen. I teach about, basic, depending on the sophistication and experience of the group. I might teach the Four Noble Truths or the Eightfold Path, or what we call the three marks of existence, impermanence, emptiness, and suffering. Or I'll teach one of, like the Fukan Zazen. I'll teach one of Dogen's teachings.
Interesting.
But we just stay with that one practice because that was the practice of my teachers.
What about the advanced practitioners? Do they attain some jhanas or something? Do you have?
Yeah, we do some. We do. There's a Japanese term for it. I'm not recalling the term right now, but it's not intentional.
Yes.
Kensho is one of the terms. Kensho mean encountering the self, or self-aware knowledge, or self-enlightenment. Has different translations, but it's something that will just come by itself. So
Right.
we're not seeking it, and then we don't hold on to it. It rises like everything else, and what the important thing is, how is it going to affect our behavior? So are we going to relate to people through the three poisons, ignorance, greed, and hatred, and fear, or are we going to relate through compassion and wisdom?
Okay, so it is the same, like thinking's bad rap would be those three poisons, right?
Yeah.
We call in Pali like lobha, dosa, moha, or like greed, hatred, and delusion. Yeah.
Do you use the wheel of life and death at all?
We use the same actually.
Yeah.
We also use the same, like how to apply the dependent origination, paticca samuppada.
Okay. Yeah.
And also the three characteristics, as you said, anicca, dukkha, anatta, like impermanence and the suffering and the no soul. So I think in comparison, I don't see anything so far uniquely different.
Yeah. Well, because the bottom line is the Buddhist teaching, right? The Four Noble Truths.
Right. And also Zen is also related to jhana and dhyana and chang, right? They are all related to meditation.
Yes.
Right. Okay. I hope our audience have learned a lot of things from Sensei today. And thank you so much for explaining these beautiful teachings to our community, and really appreciate and looking forward to seeing you sometime.
Thank you.
Hopefully I will be in New Jersey somewhere in this year, so hopefully I'll contact you.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
So,
and
I'll email you that article.
yeah, please. Yeah, we will post that article as well. And with that, I think we are going to conclude today. Reverend Sensei, do you have any more thing for us to, before we wrap up today's discussion?
Just keep practicing no matter what. for the benefit of all beings.
Yeah. Okay. That precisely gives us a wonderful message for the new year, right? And yeah, so that would be our new year message too. Keep practicing no matter what. And yeah, so even if it is painful, still keep practicing. And even if your mind is wandering, it is wild like buffalo, still keep practicing. And one day you will be rewarded for your hard work. And
It's true.
right. So, with that, we conclude today's session, Thinking's Bad Rap. And today's session was conducted by Reverend Seiso Paul Cooper. And we really appreciate on behalf of our community. And a lot of people also have responded here. And we also want to appreciate all of them for joining us today. And we have some Facebook user, VL Harinaidu, uh, what he says here, Jai Bhim Namo Buddhaya, Bahujana Hitaya, Bahujana Sukhaya. Okay, for the well-being and happiness of the many. And another one from Facebook, Namo Buddhaya, and Indika Tushari, Namo Buddhaya, and Malka Junswami, Makami Bodh. Bodh is like a Buddhist. Namo Buddhaya, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, so this is the article that you mentioned. I might be a little bit wrong. And Vandami Bhante, Sukma Hema. And so, yeah, to all of them, and also to our wonderful guest lecturer today, Reverend Seiso Paul Cooper. Thank you so much. May you be well, happy, healthy with the blessings of the Noble Triple Gem. We will stay in touch and looking forward to hearing from you more in the coming weeks. And may all our friends around the world also be blessed by the Noble Triple Gem. With that, we conclude. Good night
Good night.
and Happy New Year.